Winston Churchill, in his secret cabinet meeting on June the 23rd, 1940, actually said to his war cabinet, the inner cabinet, "I think we would be wrong not to accept the peace offer which Mr. Hitler has made to us, provided that we can secure the necessary guarantees of sovereignty for the Empire and the Commonwealth countries." I can see you're hushed by that, because now you're realizing I'm not just spouting propaganda at you. If Churchill himself said this on June the 23rd, 1940, why in God's name didn't he go ahead and do the morally courageous thing, which was to realize that the war was a lost concern, and that by fighting it any longer we couldn't help Poland, but we would damage the British Empire, which on balance was far more important for the future of the world than what happened to Poland, which really was no concern of ours. And why, you may ask, did Churchill not continue and make peace on that day or the next? Well, the answer is that over the next 2 or 3 days you find Churchill considering doing a peace deal with Hitler, with that man, again on June the 23rd, June the 26th, and again on a few days in July. But on each occasion, of course, he's gone home to his bunker in Downing Street under 17 feet of concrete. He's gone home to his bunker and he's slapped himself on the head and he's said to himself, "My God, what am I saying? I must be out of my mind. If we make peace with Hitler tomorrow, then I am finished the day after." Winston Churchill would never have been retained as Prime Minister by the British, and Winston Churchill in June 1940 was a man who had only disasters to his name. The Dardanelles conflict, Gallipoli, my father fought in Gallipoli aboard a British Navy battleship, that fiasco, the Chanak crisis of 1927, the Norway fiasco of 1940, in which Churchill himself, as First Lord of the Admiralty, was responsible by his bungling, which I won't describe here, but by his immense bungling. Drunken meetings of the Admiralty will have played their part. Churchill was responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of British and French and Polish troops in the Narvik campaign of 1940. And of course, by June 1940, he had seen France completely overrun in a few weeks by Hitler, and he himself had masterminded the bungling, disgraceful debacle of Dunkirk. And I could justify those adjectives too, but of course we're running out of time. The war would still see further fiascos at Churchill's hand. In 1941, he masterminded the Tobruk defeat, he masterminded Tripoli, he masterminded Greece, he masterminded Crete, he masterminded all these fiascos. He himself presided over these meetings, and we know how they were conducted because Robert Menzies, the Australian Prime Minister, attended and kept a detailed diary. And in August 1942, I know this is a deep concern to you Canadians, Winston Churchill was personally responsible for the decision to invade at Dieppe, to land Allied British in quotation marks, troops at Dieppe. They were always called British, but of course, as you Canadians know, most of the troops who were given the job of landing on the beaches at Dieppe were Canadian, and not many came back. The reason not many came back I can reveal to you now, and it's going to be in the Churchill biography, and nobody has ever published this fact before, is that the Germans knew that the target was going to be Dieppe. They knew that the Canadians were coming, and they knew where to expect them, and they were ready. I've got all the German intelligence material relating to this. And far more insidious, not only did the Germans know that Dieppe was going to be the target of that landing, that amphibious raid, we knew that the Germans knew in advance. And yet we still went ahead and landed on Dieppe. And I will tell you the source of this. It is document SRH 013 in the National Archives of the United States, a history of the British and American ultra code-breaking effort, where they give the Dieppe example as one, where we intercepted the German Air Force signals in which it became explicitly clear that the Germans were anticipating an amphibious landing at Dieppe on that day. And you won't find that in any of the Allied official histories, and you know why. Because, of course, I mentioned to you that the official historians were never told about ultra and the code-breaking effort. But as a matter of deep concern for you Canadians, I know that Churchill insisted that the Dieppe raid go ahead, although the Germans knew when and where the Canadians were going to land. And if you want to know why, therefore, the Canadians were sacrificed, I will give you another clue, which I have now from the Russian files, because the Russians, too, have helped this arch-fascist and neo-Nazi David Irving to write the history of the Second World War. They've given me complete access to their records of their meetings with Winston Churchill during the pre-war and wartime years, right up to the Potsdam meeting. I have all the records of their secret meetings with Churchill in the Russian language, which leave out, as you can imagine, quite a lot that is not contained in the British archives. And on this particular occasion, we find a few weeks before Dieppe, Winston Churchill telling the Soviet ambassador in London privately, who was complaining that the British were not doing enough to help the Second Front and to help the Russians in their misery in the run-up to the Stalingrad campaign, of course, Churchill said, "I'm proposing an operation shortly which may well lead to the loss of 50,000 Allied lives. But even if it costs the lives of 50,000 Allied troops, it will be worthwhile if it shows to the Soviet government that we are on their side, body and soul." And even if the operation is a fiasco, he explicitly said that, even if it costs 50,000 lives and is a failure, it will be worthwhile. And this is just a few weeks before the Dieppe operation. So you begin to see the true history of the Second World War, which is being kept from you Canadians too. It's a scandalous episode, and I can understand well that if I had a Canadian publisher, at this point the Canadian publisher might well put his head in his hands and turn the manuscript back to me and say, David Irving, we can't accept this manuscript. It's telling the Canadian public things that they don't want to be told. But I think that there is a section of the Canadian public who very much wants to be told about this.